Now let me approach this from the other side and turn to the other problem, the origin of society. Here, Hegel's mentors are not Fichte and Schelling, but Hobbes and Rousseau. I'll begin with Hobbes. His argument is roughly this. In the state of nature, men were involved in constant conflict. This was bad for everyone, since even the strongest person needs to sleep and is then vulnerable to attack, exposed to violence. So to end this state of affairs, they agreed among themselves to submit unconditionally and unilaterally to one of their number. This original pact of submission determines the fundamental nature of the sovereign and his rights over individuals even today. A citizen is bound to obey the sovereign without question, though Hobbes tends to qualify this by adding such conditions as that a subject is not obliged to obey the sovereign to the extent of breaking the natural law. Rousseau is less straightforward than Hobbes, and Hegel probably misinterprets him, but I won't bother with that. I'll just present his argument as Hegel sees it. In the state of nature, men for some time recognized each other's existence without forming societies. They didn't fight each other, so their motive for leaving the state of nature was the desire for goods that require cooperation, not fear of death at the hands of each other as it was for Hobbes. Eventually they all made a contract with each other to set up a state that would secure their cooperation. And this too determines the nature of the state today. The state is based on a contract. If this contractual arrangement no longer suits me, then I am free to opt out of it, to withdraw from the contract. Hegel does not give a very explicit account of the origin of the state or of society. In fact, he believed that we cannot study history seriously without written records, and there cannot be written records without a period from a period when there was no state or society. So serious history can't say much about the origins of state or society. Still, he does indicate some of his agreements and disagreements with Hobbes and Rousseau, and they're as follows. Firstly, for both Hobbes and Rousseau, human beings are fully formed people before they enter society. Hobbes' combatants and Rousseau's people who have long recognised each other's existence but not yet got around to cooperating are very much like us. They just haven't yet formed the appropriate social arrangements. For Hegel, this is not so. Before people recognise each other in the sense of interacting socially, they are not proper human beings. Secondly, about how people behave to each other in the state of nature, Hegel agrees with Hobbes and disagrees with Rousseau. In the state of nature, he thinks people fought. He doesn't have much evidence for this except travellers' tales that suggested to him that this is how people behaved in Africa in his own time. His main reason for assuming it is different from Hobbes's. Hobbes believed that men in the state of nature fought because people in his own day, relieved of civilised restraints, fought each other in the English Civil War. Hegel believed that they fought in the state of nature because they were unlike us, they were wild and uncivilised. But both Hegel and Hobbes believed that they fought in the state of nature. Except that Hobbes thinks we would do it nowadays if the restraints were relieved, whereas Hegel does not. Thirdly, Hegel agrees more with Hobbes than with Rousseau on what gets society started. It seems to be a pact of submission, not a general contract between equals. Only this pact does not, as it does in Hobbes, give rise directly to a state or even a complete society. In this book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel doesn't tell us how this happens. He moves on to other themes, Stoicism, skepticism, and so on, which seem to have little bearing on the origin of the state. But he often expresses disagreement with Rousseau's view that the state arose by a contract. Fourthly, Hegel disagrees both with Hobbes and Rousseau about their common assumption that their theories about the origin of the state also tell us about the nature of the state today. Even if the state did arise from a contract, it's not a contractual arrangement today. One is not free to opt out of the state if it doesn't satisfy one's requirements, not at least unless one emigrates. The state perhaps did originate in some sort of pact of submission, but it's not like that nowadays. We're not kept in order merely by the sovereign's threat of force or by the fear that if we disobey the sovereign, all hell will break loose and we'll find ourselves back in the state of nature. We, this is the Germans of Hegel's time, have been well educated in the schools and universities of Prussia or other German states. We go to church regularly. We thoroughly imbibed habits of obedience and orderly conduct. We are, in short, quite different from people in the state of nature and quite different from the combatants in Hegel's story in the Phenomenology.